Ernst & Young and Ada and Worthing Council. On item 1, I have apologies from Councillor Cherry. Any other apologies? No? Okay. Item 2, to receive declarations of interest from members in respect of any matter on the agenda. Do I have any? No, I have none. Thank you. And if I can put the minutes of the meetings from the 19th of April and the 24th of May, and recognising that we have a couple of new members who weren't at the meeting of the 19th of April, perhaps I can just get assurance from Louise that the minutes are correct.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I can confirm that I was at that meeting and the minutes are an accurate record.
And I can confirm also. So if we could have hands up or affirmative act to approve the minutes of both meetings. Those okay? Is that agreed? You can vote on the assurance of the people who were. Okay, so those are formally approved. Thank you. To consider any items that the Chairman agrees is urgent business, I have none. So if we move on to item 5, the financial statements for 21-22, and I'd first invite Louise to make a statement about the accounts. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm really pleased to present to this committee the financial statements for 21-22, which are unqualified, which is fantastic, and we did have one objection that wasn't accepted. Members of this committee who are returning will know that we recently signed off another set of accounts, and so you may see a couple of things that have happened in both accounts around COVID grants that are sort of their time and place. But I think as it's EY's independent examination of our accounts, it's important to let them present their work. So, Chairman, invite Kevin Suter.
Yes, please, Kevin, or Katie then, please.
Yes, so as has been said, we're here today to present the Auditor's Annual Report and the Audit Results Report in respect of the audit of the 21-22 financial statements. So whilst the Auditor's Annual Report is listed as Appendix A in the agenda pack, we'd actually like to present the Audit Results Report first. So that's included in Appendix B starting from page 41. So the report starting from page 41 provides the auditor's view on the financial statement of accounts for 21-22 for members to consider their approval. I'm not going to go through the reports in significant amounts of detail, but just want to pull out a couple of key areas. First area I want to pull out is from page 45. So this highlights the changes from our planned audit procedures that we'd previously included within our audit plan. The first one is a fairly minor update to our materiality assessment, which is reassessed on receipt of the draft financial statements. And then secondly, it just highlights the additional audit procedures we were required to undertake in regard to the audit of the pensions liability. I'll come on to that in a little bit more detail in a bit. We've also included the status of the audit. So we've now completed all of our main audit procedures. The remaining items are just in relation to the final receipt of the signed statements. If we then move forward to page 47, this contains details of the audit differences that have been identified, obviously including the COVID grants one previously mentioned. All of these have been adjusted within those updated financial statements, with the exception of the first one listed on the page for the contingent liability balance. Section 2, which starts on page 50 of the agenda pack, sets out the work performed on our areas of audit focus. Pages 51 through to 53 include the details of our fraud risk procedures and the completion of those. We didn't identify any misstatements or unusual transactions within this area. Page 54, if we then just skip ahead, includes our procedures performed against the significant risk on the valuation of investment property. In testing this area, we employed the use of our own experts, continuing to identify misstatements in this area consistent with previous years. So that's resulted in the recommendation, which has been raised again as detailed later on in the report, so the council can continue to improve their processes with their external valuer. Pages 56 and 57 include the response to our other identified areas of audit focus. 56 specifically focusing on the valuation of property, plant and equipment valuations. That also resulted in the identification of a misstatement. And then 57 includes our work performed on that pensions liability valuation mentioned. It's worth noting that due to the overall delays within the audit, the council became in receipt of further information from the March 2022 triennial valuation. This had the potential to have a material impact on the 21-22 financial statements, so an updated IAS 19 report was commissioned from the actuary, and we completed additional audit procedures against this report. That then resulted in an adjustment to the pension liability balance disclosed in the financial statements of just under £3 million. And then section 3 of the report, which starts from page 58, includes our draft audit report. This includes the unqualified opinion, as previously mentioned, which we intend to issue on completing the remaining areas that we previously mentioned. Skipping ahead then to page 68, we'd previously mentioned that we'd yet to complete our risk assessment procedures in relation to our work on value for money. These have since been completed. We didn't identify any risks of significant weakness. We then completed our planned procedures against those areas and have no matters to report by exception. The final thing we'd just like to bring attention to within the audit results report is on page 72, which I'm just going to hand over to Kevin to talk about, which is the objection.
Yes, so members, we received an objection to this year's accounts, following on from the fact that we'd received an objection for the previous year. They were on different matters. This one particularly focused on compliance with public contract regulations. We did a little bit of preliminary work in order to understand exactly the nature of the objection by making a few initial inquiries to the council. The key matters that we identified in making those preliminary inquiries were the fact that the value being associated with the contract being questioned was below the regulation threshold. And we'd also undertaken an inquiry around certain employment tax matters that came with it. Without doing any detailed work, we did have assurance that the council had actually thought about those issues. On balance, having undertaken those inquiries, we decided not to accept the objection for further consideration. The judgment being made was because, predominantly because the contract was underneath the regulation's value. We didn't see that it would be of further benefit to carry on investigating that. And there was a clear factual position in terms of the value and the regulations. We also had a matter to deal with that we cover on page 72 under the heading of information provided to the auditor. So while there is a statutory right of the public to object to your accounts, members of the public or anybody can bring information to us at any time. And a member of the public during that year did ask us to look at issues around the severance payments to the former Section 151 officer. And we set out here that it covered mainly 3 areas: about reporting to the council, the actual lawfulness of the severance payment itself, and then governance procedures in appointing the subsequently newly appointed Section 151 officer. We did review each of those matters, and we did have to take quite a bit of work to get behind the issues. But ultimately, the conclusion we made was that we did not wish to further challenge the council's payments being made in terms of that severance of the officer. It did take a lot of work to get to that point, and ultimately it has run up quite a bit of expense in terms of receiving legal advice on both sides, to be honest, which is reflected, or our part of that fee at least, is reflected in the fees that we are presenting to you this evening. For information in terms of what the total audit has cost, and that's presented on page 78 of the pack. I think all in all, it has been a couple of quite expensive years in terms of the audit involved in those, particularly in those investigatory procedures around objections and information coming to the attention of the auditor. So we would quite honestly hope that there are no such matters being brought to our attention in future years, but that is something that we can't control. We will just have to react again, and if there are further issues, we will then bring those back to the committee as appropriate.
So I think that was all we kind of wanted to cover or specifically draw out on the audit results report. Given the length of the report and also the length of the auditor's annual report, we just wanted to pause to see if there was any questions before we move on, if that's okay.
Thank you, Katie. Members, do we have any questions? Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much for that overview. I just wondered, it might be me reading this wrong, but I was just looking, considering the extra work that was undertaken on that last issue that you talked about, Kevin. The planned fees, the final fees, seem to be considerably less than the planned fee. And I was kind of expecting those to be the other way around. And I was just trying to work out, should it not be more than the planned fee? Thank you.
Katie, please.
Yeah, I think it's probably worth highlighting that the planned fee heading actually is potentially incorrect and should say final fee for 2021 rather than 21. Sorry, the final fee column is 21-22's fee. The planned fee column is actually the final fee for, or as close to the final fee that we had for 2021, where there was another objection, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, for a potentially different issue that potentially resulted in a bit more fee.
We will correct that and give you an updated version of the report just to amend that mistake.
Thank you. Can I just come back on that in terms of just on page 140 in terms of the external audit costs? I noticed you just put your basic fees and not these additional costs. Would they be included elsewhere in consultancy or other expenditure? This is relating to page 140 of the, or page 50 of the actual accounts. So I note 29 external audit costs.
So from memory, and I'll have to look to the officers to confirm this or not, I think within the accounts are the fees that were known at the time, had been charged at the time. The additional fees from this year's audit and actually from the last year's audit have all been subsequent to the 31st of March 2022. So I think they're going to be reflected in the next year's set of accounts, where there will be a disclosure note that sets out what years the fees relate to.
Thank you. That makes sense. Members, any other questions? Councillor Cornish.
Thank you. On page 55, this might be a question for Louise, maybe, I'm not sure. Where the last paragraph on that page about the issues raised on the valuations, I just wondered in terms of process, because obviously there's a statement there that says evidence, where are we?
So which page is this?
Page 55.
Right, thank you.
There's a note there to say that we were disappointed to note similar issues raised by our experts regarding the valuations as reported in our prior year report, and that no evidence has been provided how the recommendation made and agreed in prior years has been actioned. I just wondered, I just wonder if there's been any kind of action since that stops that happening.
Yes,
Thanks.
Thank you. Louise.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so I think, as I sort of said in my introduction, you've had two sets of historical accounts relatively quickly, and although that was pointed out, actually we're thinking about those having been relatively recent. In terms of actions taken, we refreshed the contract in October 2022, so 6 months after this report, and we have negotiated a change to the date so that we're all working to a similar point in the year. I would also say that although to us, that's quite a lot of money. It's actually not particularly material, and valuations are only sort of indicative, so it wouldn't be something I would worry about too much. I would also note it's possible that based on the pressures in the national audit system, it may be that auditors are not required to go into this level of detail, so it wouldn't become a material thing in the future. But yes, we have taken steps, absolutely.
I think perhaps we need to remember that the previous accounts were only approved in April, and now we're seeing the following year, but hopefully we will have another year's accounts sometime in the future, and hopefully not see any issues there. Thank you. Any other questions? No? Well, if that's the case, then if we can formally move on to approve the accounts in terms of the recommendation, so to agree the auditor's annual report. And if you wanted to go on to the second part?
Yeah, if that's okay. It was a very brief summary on the auditor's annual report, which I believe starts on page 13. This is provided as a final draft and it's aimed at members of the public, so we ask that it's published on the website. The difference in audience means that it contains some more summarised information around the audit of the financial statements and more detail on our value for money work. Because it's summarising the work that we've already detailed in terms of the audit of the financial statements, I'm going to skip over any of the information around that, but just bring out a couple of points that starts from page 19, where we've detailed the results of our value for money work. This work focused on 3 separate reporting criteria which are listed on that page, and then they've been summarised separately from pages 20 through to 22, and then further information is then contained against these within the commentary included in the report starting from page 24. So again, we'll just pause to take any questions against that. Wasn't anything else I was going to draw out.
Thank you. Members, do we have any further questions? No, thank you. Any other points you'd like to make? No? Well, thank you very much. So if we can formally approve the accounts, I recommend to propose the council agree the if we can approve the financial statements and letter of representation for the year ended 2022 and agree that the chair signs off the above. Is that agreed? If you can formally vote, please. Okay, 4 votes. We have. Okay, that's approved. Thank you. If we can move on then to, thank you, Kevin and Katie, if you want to leave now, I'm happy.
That's okay. We will hang on to the end of the meeting.
Thank you. It shouldn't take very much. And moving on then to item 6, the review of Treasury management activity. And Louise, if you can introduce this report, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So again, just a couple of short words. We continue to work really closely with our partners at Ada Worthing. Members of this committee who are returning will know that we extended that SLA and we believe we get excellent value for money. Particularly over the last sort of 10 months or so, we've been actively working on doing the very best we can to make good investments while interest rates are really strong. And you'll have, if you've watched Cabinet, you'll have seen from our financial outturn that that's served us really well. But for the bulk of the report, I'd introduce Joseph from Ada Worthing to talk you through it, if that's okay, Chairman.
Thank you. Yes, please, Joseph.
Okay, hello. So this is a backward-looking report reflecting the activities of 22-23, and it's a rather lengthy report. There's a number of prudential indicators that we're required to report on, but in essence, what it says is that we have operated within the boundaries set by the TMS earlier on in that financial year. We've continued to work to maximise yield and balance that with minimising risk. Largely speaking, the investments are all in building societies, banks, UK banks, and money market funds. We also have used some local authorities to invest in, and we made a few changes, as some of you may remember, with regard to those authorities on the naughty step, so to speak. But I can say now that we don't have anything left with Thurrock. There's a number of things on borrowing which we're required to report on, but as I'm sure you're aware, that's not really relevant to this authority, and you're in the fortunate position of being not having to borrow, and we've far exceeded the investment income, largely because when the budget was set, that was when rates were still looking like they were going to stay very low, and then all sorts of things happened, which you're all aware of, and that continues to be the case, that we're exceeding budget. So that's largely it. I think the only other thing I would draw, I'd like to mention is the investment in the property fund. That's on 8.2, and what I've attempted to do there is allay your worries about the decline in the value of the fund, because it is a long-term investment. Yield is historically very good. We've had a dip during this financial crisis, but then if you look at the graph, we had a far worse situation back during the credit crisis, and over time the fund has returned more or less to its original value. It's the long-term view as far as that's concerned. So that's all I really had to say. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Thank you, Joseph. It's satisfactory. It's good to see that in terms of we're effectively debt-free as a local authority, as well as actually increasing our income from bank interest, at least for the moment. Members, do we have any questions? So, Lorraine.
It's really just a question of getting a better understanding. So perhaps you could tell me a little bit more about the minimum revenue provision, and in particular the amount that's been set aside. Is this for a debt that has not yet been incurred?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask about the minimum revenue provision. It is an anomaly, if you like, of local authority accounting, because we don't depreciate in the same way that they do in the private sector. But largely speaking, it's a charge to revenue for the capital spend that is funded by borrowing. Now, you don't really have borrowing as such, but the Serco lease is a form of notional borrowing, if you like. So we make a provision for that. And then there was a decision taken, I suppose, by the previous Section 151 officer when it was the receipt from one of your land disposals, can't remember the name of it, and that was used to pay for the Orchard Shopping Centre. But I think the decision was that 5 million of that would be funded, if you like, by internal borrowing. Right. And so there's a charge of £100,000 a year as part of that MRP.
So how has this particular sum been arrived at?
So that's the MRP, it really matches the borrowing cost of the finance lease, and the 100,000 is 5 million over 50 years.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Sorry, Louise, could you just come in as well, please?
Yes, Councillor, I just also wanted to sort of come back to your original point around getting into the detail of this. We will have some specific Treasury management training in January, which will hopefully break some of this down.
Yes, welcome to the wonderful world of local authority finance. It does take us a little while to get used to. Any other questions, members? Okay, if we can formally note the report and recommend the 22-23 prudential indicators to the council to agree. If we can formally approve this, the motion, please. Is that agreed?
Someone hasn't voted?
How are we doing? Has everyone voted?
Four registered. We just check.
It's a majority in favour anyway.
Just do a show of hands for ringers.
Sorry. Okay, yes, that's agreed anyway. Thank you. Thank you. If we can move on then, and in terms of, we have the item 7, the Audit Committee Work Programme. And Louise, if you can introduce this, please.
Thank you. Yes, so the recommended work programme is obviously for members to debate and discuss. The suggestions that we've put there are items at the point in the cycle, either for budget setting or accounts or audit, where we think that they best fit. And you'll see that that means you've got quite a potentially busy meeting in November as we're in that budget setting process, but welcome feedback and additional comments.
Thank you, Louise. Any comments from members? I have asked about internal audit, and in terms of receiving reports at each meeting, ideally in terms of updates. Could you just comment on the progress of the internal auditors, please?
Yes, so we should have a fairly significant update for you because it will be their annual report at the next meeting. And as per the chairman's request, we'll then make sure you've got a further interim update at the March meeting. But Mazars will be here next time, probably with a substantial number of audits for you to hear back on.
Okay, thank you. No, if there's no other questions, then if we can approve the work programme. Okay, thank you. That's approved unanimously. And if we move on to 8 questions pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 10.2, I have none, and therefore, with thanks to the officers and to our Ernst & Young for attending, I close the meeting at 7:30. Thank you.